Hello, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller, a holistic canine nutrition and well being consultant and the co creator of the Fetch framework. Along with my incredible colleague, Stacy Renfree, my aim is to help you feel less overwhelmed and more confident in taking a holistic approach to your dog's health through integrating evidence-based nutrition with spiritual wisdom. Thank you for being here with me today. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Sandra van Tongerloo is a brain health coach as well as a professional chef who has a very personal relationship with Alzheimer's disease. All of the women on her mother's side of the family passed away from Alzheimer's. And it was Sandra's 6-year journey of caring for her mother that inspired her to start the Elisabeth Hendrix method and cooking for cognition, fusing brain-boosting recipes and cognitive coaching to help women future-proof their brain health. I first came across Sandra's work around the time that Stacy and I recorded our Fetch First Friday episode on canine cognitive dysfunction. If you haven't listened to that, I highly recommend checking it out after you listen to this episode with Sandra, because there are so many parallels in how we can support our dog's brain health and our own at the same time, with many of the same things. Sandra and I talk about how 70% of Alzheimer's patients are women and what we can do to prevent it. The impacts of feeding the animals that we eat species-inappropriate diets on our own health. The role of gut health on our brain health. She shares top tips on how to support brain health, including specific foods that you can add to your own diet. And many of these will be familiar if you listen to what we recommend for dogs. Sandra also shares some tips for what kitchen equipment you should include and which ones to eliminate in order to get you started feeling confident in the kitchen. P.S. This will help you get started doing DIY food for your dog too if you're interested in that. We also talk about the importance of movement for brain health and how your dog can help you with this too. She also shares her perspective on emerging alternative therapies for Alzheimer's and brain health. And we talk about so much more. She also shares a beautiful story about the unexpected bond that her dog Speck and her mother developed, and how it demonstrates the resiliency of the brain and spirit, even when it may seem that Alzheimer's has completely taken over. Now, before we get started, can I please ask you to do me a favor? If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider rating and leaving a review. Or if you watch on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate this because it lets me know that this work is adding value to your life with your dogs. And it also tells the algorithm to put the podcast in front of more people, which means that we can help support more people to better nourish their dogs and themselves, which is our mission. It just takes a moment, but it makes a world of a difference. So if you wouldn't mind pausing and taking a moment to rate and review or share your thoughts after you've listened to this episode, I would be so grateful. Okay, on that note, let's go. Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for joining me on the Mystic Dog Mama podcast today. I am beyond thrilled that you're here with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited. Oh, this is going to be so much fun because just to let listeners know, we were chit-chatting for a little while before recording, and it's like, oh my God, I just love talking to you. This is such an important topic and it's so rich. And I just know everyone with a dog and with a brain is going to get something out of this. So I'm excited to dive into all things brain health with you today and cognitive vitality as you frame it as well. I think it's such an important and timely topic, especially since listeners will know that I recently, with Stacy Renfree of Hozo Hounds on our Fetch First Friday playlist, we recently recorded a conversation all about canine cognitive dysfunction. And there are so many parallels between what we experience with our dogs and how we can support our dogs and our own brain health. So we're going to dive into all stuff brain today, which I'm very excited.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Lovely. Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could maybe share with listeners a little bit who will not necessarily be familiar with what brain health and brain health coaching actually involves and how you got into being concerned about the health of our brains.
Yeah, I have MA in literature, and then I had a restaurant and ice cream parlor in France. I'm originally from Holland, so nothing predestined me to become a brain health coach, except for the fact that my mom had Alzheimer's, and her mom had Alzheimer's, and her aunt had Alzheimer's, and every woman on her side of the family has died from Alzheimer's. So after a 6-year period when I took care of her, I thought, well, I have to just see what that can be done for myself, because I wanted to save myself. That's how it all started. So I did a coaching course in the States with Dr. Bredesen, who's very strong on Alzheimer's reversal even, and brain health coaching formation as well. So of course, sorry. So yes, that's it's basically how to save myself. That's how it started. And then what I've learned, I thought this is too important not to keep for myself, because Alzheimer's, you have to know, it's like 70% of Alzheimer's patients are women. And there's also a 20-year time window between the start of Alzheimer's in your brain and symptoms actually showing up as being recognizable as Alzheimer's. So this is a window of opportunity, but not everybody is aware of that. So that's what I'm trying to raise awareness about, this window of opportunity.
Oh, I love that. And I love that we were talking before we started recording about how, I would say the majority of listeners, when you're looking at the kind of stats, is roughly in the perimenopausal age range, either coming into it, fully into it, just exiting it, that kind of a thing. And so I have brought on people in the past to kind of talk about what's going on in the body with perimenopause, in large part as well, because we see this bias in research for men, and women are often left out of studies. They're left out of a lot that has to do with actually understanding the body and what's going on with the body, in part because our hormones create a little bit of a difficult landscape for scientists to navigate. But the consequence of that is that we are underrepresented in not only studies, but also in understanding how different things impact us, compared to how they impact men. We know this with, for example, like heart disease and heart attacks. The symptoms are very different in women than they are for men. And so one of the things I'm really excited about in terms of talking to you about this and bringing some awareness to is how we as women start to empower ourselves with understanding our own health and taking back control and getting a sense of how do we know what questions to ask healthcare providers, for example, and how do we push back and reclaim our agency? And I'm wondering, in some of that conversation, what have you noticed as far as how do symptoms start to show up in women? What are some things that we might need to be thinking about in this window of opportunity where we can start to both prevent any kind of further damage occurring, and then also when we do notice that things might have started happening, how do we support our brain health? What does it look like? What should we be aware of?
I think the biggest thing is brain fog. It's the biggest complaint of women in menopause.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you're on your way to developing cognitive decline, of course, but it's a thing to take a closer look at. Thankfully, nowadays, menopause is a hot topic. It's been in the press and media a bit more than even 10 years ago. So there's Italian neurologist called Lisa Mosconi, who just got a book out, and she's even been to the White House presenting this subject, because, like you said, it is so we are so underserved, especially after our reproductive years. It's like, okay, done, it's over. Yes. So yes, but brain fog, mood swings. You start having difficulty sleeping. Sleep is so important for your brain health, and it turns out that if you don't sleep enough, you cannot clear out the toxins in your brain, and that means probably trouble down the road. So I would say, yeah, sleep, mood swings, and brain fogs are the most important things. And then you have motion. I call it motion. That's the umbrella term for tackling these. And it doesn't, like I said earlier, it doesn't mean you have symptoms. It can be just menopause, just a drop of estrogen, but it doesn't hurt if you start thinking about motion, and that means get everything into motion, movement, nutrition, and mindset. Because sometimes you don't sleep because you keep running on that hamster wheel of worry about the past or the future, or ruminating about things that happens. And with nutrition, it's the same thing. If you don't get your digestion into motion, if you eat food without fiber, for instance, it's more difficult to make all the essential things your brain needs to thrive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely. And we're going to dive into some of the nutrition together on this because, like we were saying before we started recording, there's a huge overlap between what we can do for our own brain health and what we're doing for our dog's brain health. And so, why not marry them up? But I wonder too if you could talk about, you were mentioning to me before we started recording that some of the kind of primary theories and recognizing them as theories around Alzheimer's and what's going on in the brain are not necessarily totally indicative of what is going on. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what is happening in the brain when somebody starts to develop Alzheimer's.
For Alzheimer's, it's basically they notice that the brain is shrinking. That is the big thing. So aging normally involves shrinkage of the brain, but this is an accelerated shrinkage of the brain, and sometimes your whole parts of the hippocampus, for instance, gets wiped out. When I saw the first scan of my mom's brain, she died of Alzheimer's after 10 years after her diagnosis. Both of her hippocampi were like half the size of what they should be. So this looks like big holes in the brain, and that's how you that's what it looks like. But you don't see that at the beginning, of course. This is when it's already when the Alzheimer's already has started.
Right. When it's
Yes.
further
Yeah.
advanced. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So the other thing is that you can nowadays get blood markers for amyloids and p-tau. Sorry. It's whole new, and it means that if you can determine if you're already have elevated levels of these blood markers, then you can do what it takes to try to lower them. And there are several ways to go about this.
What are some of those ways? How can people lower them?
It starts with monitoring your blood pressure, monitoring your lipid panel, making sure your homocysteine isn't elevated. Any test you can do with your doctor that is as a baseline is very important to establish, because that way you can see over time what is helpful and what isn't in your tactics. Some people say Alzheimer's is considered as diabetes type 3. So the whole blood sugar roller coaster, glucose levels that are all over the place is not a good sign. I think every person that has died of Alzheimer's had insulin resistance, or 99%. So that's also a thing to check. It's a lot. It's really a lot. Yes.
It is a lot. For people who are not familiar with what insulin resistance is, could you explain a little bit about that? What's happening
Yeah,
in the body with that?
insulin resistance is if you're. It's like insulin is like a key. This is like layman. I'm not. I'm just. I'm just not a doctor. So
Yeah,
this is a disclaimer. This layman's explanation is like a key. You get fuel, but it turns it into glucose, and the glucose has to go somewhere. It goes into your bloodstream. It goes into your muscles. It goes into your liver. But if you have too much of it, and your the transportation means if the insulin is needed, it's like a key knocking on the cell's door, asking, "Can I get in? Can I get in?" But you can't because there is too much.
too much of it.
So, and that means oftentimes storage of fats, or you develop a fatty liver, that kind of thing. So it's your metabolism is out of whack, out of balance.
Yeah. No, I think it's something like we hear a lot about, but we don't necessarily understand it and understand that link to what it is that we are eating. And you had mentioned, and I think this is a really good point as well, when we talk about like ultra processed foods and how this translates to what we even see with dogs, where if you're feeding your dog kibble, that is the majority of it is carbohydrates. And so that is like a blood sugar spike for the dog. And they have an even more difficult time processing that than we do because they're not designed to eat carbohydrates in the same way and at this in the same amounts that we do. So when Stacy and I were talking about canine cognitive dysfunction and some ways that we can help prevent it, one of the first things we say is get rid of the carbs like that. Get off the ultra processed foods. But it's the exact same thing for us. It's the exact
Yes,
same thing for us.
yes, of course, but also the lobbies are so strong. I mean, you go to a supermarket, 80% of it is ultra processed, if it's for you or for your dog. So very powerful lobbies to buy these ultra processed foods, and they're designed to get you hooked. They have very smart people designing them for you to reach this bliss point, this optimum mixture of fat, sugar, and salt. So you cannot stop eating, and that's of course the whole idea behind ultra processed foods, is that you keep eating them and keep buying them. Yeah, so we're up against something quite difficult, but once you realize that, you can take your precautions
Mm-hmm.
against it. I
Yeah.
mean, just change where you shop, for instance. Fresh food markets. Yes. Also, there's so much sugar hidden in everything that also for the dog food, it's just difficult to avoid it if you go to a supermarket. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The easiest thing to do would be change where you shop.
Mm-hmm. It's
Yes.
also why I am a fan. Well, it's one of the reasons why I'm a fan of do-it-yourself approaches to making your dog's food as well, where you're selecting the ingredients and putting
Yeah.
them together. So one, you know what is going into the food and you can control that. And that's also particularly helpful if you've got a dog with any kind of health challenge because you can customize it and make sure that everything is serving the dog. But also you're avoiding then all those hidden things, like you said. And when
Right.
you, I think, I was joking around with some of my friends about sort of like when you see those memes of like you recognize how old you are when, like you're dancing to this song or, whatever. You're starting to have those conversations like, remember when, that kind of thing. But we were joking about, remember when we had to do a home economics course when we were in middle school? So like 13 or 14, I think we were. And we learned the basics of like cooking and sewing and all of those vital skills that are so important to living, right? Like to being a human in the world. And so many of those programs, I mean, at the time we were like, what's the point of this? This isn't academic. It's not going to help me get into whatever school or whatever, just ridiculousness. But in reflecting back on it, those were some of the most important courses. And I think a lot of people I see this from the dog side of things. They feel ill-equipped to cook for their dogs because they feel ill-equipped to cook for themselves. They don't necessarily have those skills. So like it's to your point of like we have the lobbyists at one level kind of controlling the narrative, and then when those skills are stripped of us of how to actually take control and prepare our food, we do become dependent upon the convenience of something ultra processed. But I think this is kind of we're in an era where we're being required to really look at a lot of this stuff and look at how do we reclaim our agency and reclaim some of those skills that would help us feel really comfortable going to the natural market and just picking stuff up and knowing how to put those ingredients together and not being so frightened of how to do that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Um, well, you see a lot of food-related things on the internet or even TV, and it also always looks really impressive because it's people competing to be master chef or whatever, or gorgeous, gorgeous settings in Italy where they're just out of magically put the nicest meals on the table, but it doesn't have to be so complicated. And it takes just a couple of really fast and practical tips to get started. And I think that's what is needed most.
Yeah.
Not these very complicated dishes that you can impress your father-in-law with or your mother-in-law with. But yeah, something just. And it starts with equipment. If you have a steaming basket and a pot, you can make lovely, lovely meals with vegetables and just season them with gorgeous olive oil or walnut oil and some good quality vinegar, and you have already a wonderful dish with vegetables, and it doesn't require that much skill actually.
Yeah.
So, and if you have a couple of those, you're good to go. You can build from there. And
Okay.
it's true. It's not something people learn anymore because there is this convenience food, and it is also people are lacking in time, and sometimes fresh food markets aren't near. But it's also we've been told by the marketing companies that some things are good for you, and we all bought into that, like fortified cereal, breakfast cereals, or fortified kibble, and then they have all we and our dogs have everything we need. But it turns out it's not exactly the case. It's not the same as eating the whole foods. So yes, it's knowing this and then acting upon it. That is the most important thing, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, I agree. Like what you're saying there, it's about the bioavailability of things and that the body recognizes food, but it doesn't necessarily recognize the chemical compounds that we put together for fortified foods. And so it will either just get rid of it and so not uptake anything, or it uptakes it at improper amounts, which can cause other problems. But I wanted to kind of circle back to what you were saying about, I think this would be a great opportunity to give people some tips of what are some things that they should have in their kitchen as far as equipment if they're just kind of starting out. And we'll start to get into what are some foods that would be really helpful for them to think about having on hand to support brain health.
As far as kitchen equipment goes, I'm all for chucking out everything with Teflon. I'm sorry, but that's just not cutting it. It turns out that if it's a little bit damaged, it gets straight into your bloodstream or into your food, into your bloodstream, and they know nowadays that the blood-brain barrier isn't sterile, so you get also these strange molecules into your brain, plastics, these forever molecules. So anything plastic, that's the same, especially these black plastics with flame retardants and spatulas, that kind of thing. These boxes where you heat up these ready-made meals in the microwave, get rid of that. I would say the most important thing is a steam basket, because food cooked over steam keeps its nutrients more than boiled in water or in oil, fried in oil. So that's really important. And then the material for the skillet is either cast iron or stainless steel, no Teflon. Another thing really, really important is to get microplane blades. I'm not affiliated with microplane, but these are so gorgeous, because if you can grate like something like turmeric, ginger, Parmesan cheese very finely, and you do it quickly, and it's not a pain to clean afterwards, you'll get the benefits of all these spices, and spices are known to be super good for your brain. And you can put it in everything, in your tea, and it's just easy to use. And if you keep it on your countertop, then you just, you'll use it, and it's a tiny thing, not a big KitchenAid where you need a lot of space in your kitchen. And a good knife and a cutting board that's not plastic also, because if you keep cutting on these plastic boards, and you get also these molecules into your food, and it's not what you want.
Right.
And then for the ingredients, anything, I always say what's missing the most in most people's diets is fiber. And fiber, even though meat looks sometimes fibrous, there's no fiber in it. So anything containing fiber, that means vegetables, fruits, nuts, legumes, whole grains, that kind of thing. And preferably fresh, because the longer it stays on the shelf, that's why I always say go to a fresh food market, because the longer it stays on the shelf, the more nutrients it will leak. It just, they just evaporate. So fresh fruit and vegetables, and goes for nuts and oils as well. The fresher, the better.
Are there particular oils that you find are best for brain health?
Yes, olive oil and walnut oil. Yes.
And would you recommend cooking with them as well, or just using them as a kind of like dressing?
Dressing is better, because cooking with oil is not really what is the best thing to do for your brain. And also it's a bit of a shame for investment wise, because both olive oil and walnut oil can be considered as liquid gold nowadays, because they got really expensive, and it's a bit of a shame not to get the whole benefits out of it and cook them, because it's just not as good. Get these toxic compounds when you heat the oil. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. We talk about in canine prevention as well that there is a big move towards medicinal mushrooms for all kinds of things, but especially things like lion's mane mushroom, etc., for brain health. Do you find that in the human health side of things as well?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fun thing about mushroom is, if you put them in the sun, they will actually develop more vitamin D. So before you eat them, to up your vitamin D levels, put them in the sun. Yes, but lion's mane and reishi mushrooms and all kinds of mushrooms are top foods. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I also wanted to get your take on supplement. That's Lucky shaking, if you can hear that in the background. Oh, you could hear? Okay.
No.
But we talk about supplements, and one of the things that from my perspective as a canine nutrition consultant, when people come to me and they want to know more about supplements. And I think there's often this focus on supplements. I feel like supplements need to be targeted, that you can't out supplement a bad diet, for example. So you want to start with the diet first and get that right. And then you look at how supplements can either fill in gaps or they can add extra benefit, particularly when we're doing something kind of therapeutic, for example, where you need more concentrations of something. I'm wondering what your take is on supplements for brain health, if you recommend them and if there are any that you would recommend, or do you think that focusing on food first is a better route?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a chef at heart, so I will say food first. That said, if you see what has happened, the nutrient level of our soils have diminished. So it's a good thing to get a baseline with you. If you do a blood test, you can also get a baseline of a lot of nutrient levels in your body. So that's a good thing to do, and then supplement accordingly in concordance with your physician. I think that's a good idea. For most people, they are short on vitamin D. That's for sure. B12 is a big one as well. Even people who eat meat and dairy and fish and seafood, that kind of thing. So that should be tested and supplemented, I think. And then according to specific, you can have specific deficiencies, and I think they can only get tested and in your blood work and not just to. Apparently, the most of the supplements aren't. If you take them just because you heard on an influencer say, let's take this, take that, do this, do that, it creates a very expensive pee, like they say.
Exactly. I'm so glad you said that because my friend and colleague Stacey Redfree, who I was saying we have our Fetch membership together, we were joking around about the social media influencer effect on buying every single superfood and supplement. And from the dog perspective, I know we do this as humans, but obviously my perspective or my experiences with dog owners that have like absolute cupboards full of supplements that either they don't use or they don't actually work for your dog, which is why we talk about targeted approaches, that not every food, not every supplement is going to be right for every person. And so
No.
when you just go and buy everything, it results in very expensive pee. I like that.
Yes.
It's so
Yeah.
true. It's so true. But it was interesting that you said that most of us are vitamin D deficient and B12 deficient because we see a lot of that in the dog realm as well.
Yes.
Dogs don't manufacture vitamin D like we do through sunlight. So that limits them. You know, we can go out and get some sun, but I think that's really interesting. Why do you think that is? Do you have any personal theories on why those tend to be the ones that we're deficient in now?
Um, well, vitamin D is difficult because you have to get into the sun. Sun is, depending on where you live, is either too strong or not strong enough. So if it's too strong, you have to wear protection to protect your skin. So you never can synthesize vitamin D through your skin. B12, I think it's just the level of nutrients that is going down as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Like the soils are getting chelated by, the usual suspects such as glyphosate
Yeah.
company. Yeah. Yes. So if and like cows, they're not eating most of what they're eating is not grass, so they eat a soy or whatever. So that's an important part of it. It's just in what they eat ends up on our plates.
Yep.
And if it's not sufficient in nutrients at its start, then it's impossible for us to get that from
Exactly.
whatever is on our plates. So I think it's it has to all work together, and we've disrupted this chain by feeding cattle other things than what they have evolved to eat
That's right.
naturally.
That's
Yeah.
right. We have this conversation in the dog sphere around species appropriate diets and what does that look
Uh-huh.
like for a dog. But to your point, it stems beyond just our dogs, and we have to look at the entire food system and the entire ecology. If we've disrupted that, the disruption takes place then across the entire spectrum of the chain.
Yes.
And we even see, I mean, one of the big issues in the dog realm around reactions to food happens to be a lot of dogs have either allergies or severe intolerances to chicken. And a big part of why that is because the chickens have been fed inappropriate things. They're fed on corn. And so it's created this cascade where now the dogs can't tolerate the meat of chicken because the chickens were fed what they shouldn't be eating, and almost exclusively corn. I mean, some corn is fine, but chickens are meant to have a very varied diet as well. And so it kind of
Yeah,
points,
worms.
yeah, exactly. They're meant to eat all kinds of stuff, all kinds of stuff. But because we have disrupted that, it points back to what we were talking about before we started recording and what you're alluding to here, that we need to be thinking about these issues, that when we're thinking about brain health, it's not just about brain health. It's also tied into how are we thinking about our farming systems? How are we thinking about the wider ecology? How are we thinking about what our food is stored in? All of that kind of stuff, because it all has an impact.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a big
Yeah.
topic. But I also wondered as you were talking, and especially about the blood-brain barrier, it made me think about for dogs, one of the first things that we look at with basically any kind of issue, we've seen that the canine microbiome, the gut microbiome, has been severely disrupted, in part by feeding species inappropriate foods, in part by having them constantly exposed to toxins, whether that be flea and tick stuff or the glyphosate that is in food, all of that kind of stuff. And we see a ripple effect primarily through inflammation starting to develop in the body as a result of developing leaky gut. What are your thoughts on the relationship between gut health and Alzheimer's for humans as well?
It's like I talked about Dr. Bredesen earlier. He's getting a new book out exactly about this subject. So it's huge. It's the gut brain axis is like there is so much research nowadays that is pointing to this effect, because we need certain bacteria to make these short chain fatty acids to get to our brain and to support our cells and our neurons. So yes, to me it's clear. It's really why doesn't everybody see this so clear? Yes.
Yeah. So would you
Yes.
recommend some of the same things that we do on the kind of canine side of things too, that if you want to support basically every system's health, you have to support so brain health is included in gut health. And so feeding the gut will also help feed the brain.
100%. Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
So would
Yes.
you recommend then some of the similar things that we recommend, like fermented foods and considering the possibility of probiotics, that kind of a thing?
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yes. Yeah. Yes. It's eating the rainbow and prebiotics, probiotics. Yes, everything. At 3 times a day, half of your plate should be vegetables. So yeah, and that's 3 times a day. So you get 3 shots at it. But yes,
what's
absolutely.
well, what's interesting about you saying that too is it makes me think of, I don't know if you're familiar with this researcher, totally different topic, but it's related. Her name was Dr. Walls, Wahls, and
Yes,
the medical doctor who ended up
Terry
developing
Walls.
yes, and she ended
Yes,
up developing MS, and
yeah.
then looking at the relationship between MS and other diseases like Parkinson's, and I think she actually looked at Alzheimer's for this as well, and looking at the kind of ideal diet to support mitochondria in order
Mm-hmm.
to then support uh, brain health or also kind of like nerve health generally. But the amount, a friend of mine was doing this, following this diet after suffering from long COVID, because a lot of people with long COVID have issues with mRNA stuff and great fatigue and nothing else seems to work. And my friend has actually done really well with taking on this diet, but she said the amount of vegetables, we're talking like you said, the rainbow, dark leafy greens, not necessarily a lot of starchy vegetables, but like the really nutrient dense vegetables, the amount that we're meant to eat. She said, I can't believe it, because when you look at the sort of standard diet, particularly from an American perspective, she was like, this is like 10 times the amount of what we eat.
Yes, but did you know that the people, the most of the fiber people in the States derive that from what ingredient? Did you know which one it is? Do you know
No,
which one it is?
tell
It's
me.
coffee. It's
No.
coffee. So that just, that says it all. It's like, people don't eat enough vegetables. That's the point. That's the whole thing. And they're so beneficial for your health. But we it's easier to eat anything
Hmm.
soft because you can eat it faster. But
Hmm.
it means you don't eat the fiber. You don't chew anything. Chewing. Chewing is very important, but because your digestion starts in your mouth. You produce the saliva, and that's when the enzymes already activate. And not if you swallow, then you don't have the time to produce this kind of enzymes. And yeah, so everything is it's like a chain reaction, and
Hmm.
it's a lot, but you get used to it. You get used to eating more. But if you think, oh no, I can't eat that, when you see this, it looks bulky, but it's mainly water and fiber.
Right.
So, yes.
It's not that bad. No,
And
exactly.
it's yeah, and people are a bit, yeah, but it's satiating because fiber gives you this feeling of being satisfied.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And to your point, that's what's feeding our gut microbiome. So we
Yes.
need that. We need that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. So you've listed fiber, you've listed nuts and seeds and things like pulses like lentils, grains, good fats. We talked about omega 3s, making sure that we get omega 3s. Do you have a kind of preference on how we get omega 3s, whether that be from something like fish, like for dogs, for example, they do a better job of absorbing it from animal products versus like flax seeds or what have you. Is there a difference for humans? Where do you prefer we source our omega 3 from?
It's easier. It's more bioavailable by through these foods, the smash fish and that kind of
Okay.
thing. Yeah. Um, yes. Well, there are some environmental issues with that, especially with salmon, because there's
Hmm.
almost no wild salmon left. And once you've tasted wild salmon, if it's only about taste, it's a bit elitist. But if it's only about taste, you never want farmed salmon again.
Yeah.
It's just so different. And then there's the issue of the nutrient levels aren't that high for the same thing as cattle raised on soy. It's the same goes for farmed salmon. So yes, but there's sardines, there's anchovies, there's herrings, and what's the other one? Herrings, mackerels.
Mm,
Yes, yeah.
yeah.
But walnuts and
Walnuts, yeah.
walnut oil. I'm such a big fan of walnut oil.
I
It's
love
so
it.
fragrant, and it's just it lights up any salad, or just some steamed asparagus with a couple of drops of walnut oil. It's a gorgeous taste.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And when we think of antioxidants as well, that those are we know that those are really great for cell health generally. Are there any favorite sources that you have for making sure that we're including enough antioxidants in our diets?
I would say everything that is plant based.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't believe in superfoods in the sense that I think there are foods that are higher in nutrients than others, but it's about the combination of them. It's the variety and the combination of them. And if you eat like you like to eat apples, then I would say go and buy your apples from a different orchard, because the soil will be different. Mix it up, or go to a different shop to buy your apples or whatever. So if you don't have a wide range of what you like, you can still broaden it by changing where it comes from, and you have this benefit from it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And we say the same thing, even in terms of if you're feeding your dog beef, for example, feeding different parts of the cow so you're getting different nutrients. You're not just
Yes.
constantly having the same cut of meat for your dog, for example, but you're
Right.
varying.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I wondered if you could touch on as well, because you are a chef and you are focused on food, but you also take a broader, more holistic approach to how we can care for ourselves and our brain health. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about other lifestyle choices. We've talked about what we can eliminate from our kitchen in terms of like the plastics and all that stuff, but also what about the role of movement? And I'm wondering how our dogs might actually be able to facilitate some of our brain health with some of that too. What are some lifestyle things we can do?
Brilliant. You have to go out 3 times a day, right? If you have a dog. So you go out for a walk. It's what I do, but I already did this. But yeah, 30-minute power walks 3 times a day. So that's not bad. And well, I have to practice what I preach. I got myself a gym subscription. I'm going twice a week. Yes. Because I think movement exercise is the one subject everybody agrees upon when it comes to brain health. It's beneficial. You grow. You have these growth hormones that you make if you start moving. So there is no discussion about yes or no supplements. There's no discussion. This is a good brain food. That's not a good brain food. No, it's. Everybody is agreed upon that. So, and with a dog, I think it's just easier. And you say holistic approach. There's also this aspect. If you're a dog owner and you walk your dog, you meet other dog owners and you get to chat. There is something that bonds together, and just friendly chat. But it's very beneficial for your health in general. Just contact with other people. You're outside, you're getting some air. I only see process.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We talk about as well with dogs and dog health, enrichment and different activities and maybe changing things up. So like not always going the same route with the walk, but changing things up to kind of challenge their brains and give them new things to do as well. And I love you were sharing with me beforehand too, how you're incorporating for yourself personally. And it's something we can model as well. Trying all kinds of different things just to kind of learn new skills and to kind of challenge how you see yourself and what you think you're capable of and all of that kind of stuff. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that because I love it.
Yes. Yeah, it's one of the risk factors. There's the Lancet Commission that has identified 14 modifiable risk factors, and if you look closely at it, there's like one of the first things they say is if you have lesser official education, so you didn't finish high school or whatever, but you cannot change that, of course. It's like it is. But what you can change is be a lifelong learner and take up things to learn later in life. And that's what I decided to do. For instance, I started to do Tai Chi practices, which is very beneficial for the brain because you have to memorize all kinds of sequences and every detail counts. Mastering is a big word, but trying out social media was like a social media refusenik, and I'm trying to get established as a a brain health coach on Instagram. So yeah, it's not the same as if you, for instance, you always hear about Sudokus and crossword puzzles. But if you're once you're good with that, it's no longer beneficial. So you have to keep challenging yourself to find something you have to actually learn and work your neurons, like learning a new language or an instrument, or you can take up drawing if that's something you've never done before, but it has to be new. That's the whole thing about learning, is because you're creating these new neural pathways whilst learning. And that's what you want. You don't want your brain to shrink, you want it to grow. So
yeah, definitely. No, I love that. And I think that's something that we often overlook, and we get kind of stuck in some of our own habits and whatever. It's like, oh, I'm too tired to go and try something else or whatever. But the more that we can incorporate little things that allow us to grow in a number of levels, it's just a more expansive experience for us. And to your point of like when you have a dog, it both necessitates you doing different things. Like you have to go out and walk them, you have to go and engage differently, but you meet different people and different conversations. They take you into a different world that can help support your brain too, which I just obviously am very, very grateful to Lucky for him doing that.
It's got this social element to it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to pick your brain too on something we had a little exchange about this kind of privately, but about some of the more alternative therapies that are coming out too, and the new research for Alzheimer's around things like light and sound and the effect of frequency on the brain, which just sounds absolutely incredible. And I know you've got a little bit of experience with that through your training, learning about that too. I wonder if you could touch on some of that for people.
Yeah, there's so much that we don't know now. We didn't know, and people are just realizing that the old school theory about finding a cure for Alzheimer's, and it has to be the amyloid plaque blockers, isn't totally working, even after billions spent on it. So researchers are looking for all kinds of alternative things, and it has to do with either cold, you can, these cryo chambers are being tested, sound and lights, also exercising with oxygen masks. So oxygen is a really important thing. I do not really know if it's available to everyone, or if it's still in its infant stage, but it looks really promising, and I'm sure that we're very close to finding things that will be game changers. Really. Yeah.
I find it very exciting as somebody who's also like a Reiki practitioner and looking at the way in which we are starting to understand a little bit more the value of like energetic work and how things are connected at such a quantum level that it's new for us, and actually understanding how some of these more ancient healing technologies actually might be the thing that's leading us into the future. And I was thinking about how when Stacey and I did the episode for CCD, one of the things I came across in my research, which just absolutely blew my mind, was how in Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, which operates as both a philosophy of life and the connection of things, as well as the practical putting pieces together. There was a book that was found that was over 2,000 years old, where they had already, in a sense, discovered that there was something like Alzheimer's. They recognized that something was going on, and they linked it with the Shen energy system that governs the head. And they saw a direct connection between the Shen and the kidney. So the kidney being the home of the Jing essence, the life force essence, having a direct relationship with the mind. And when you start to look at, as well. The things that we know benefit the kidney systems, even from just a food perspective of like dark leafy greens being really good for the kidney, of things that are at the start of life, seeds and nuts and all of that kind of stuff, that there's this direct correlation between that having an impact on brain health too. And I was just astonished. I was like, this is 2000 years old. In a sense,
Yes,
it's amazing. There's so much wisdom from those things, but that were maybe called like woo and put down. But in reality, they hold a massive key to how we're thinking about moving forward with
yes,
supporting these ailments.
of course. Ayurvedic medicine, same.
Yeah.
It's been there for ages. Why would it not work? And now research is showing yes, it works, but people noticed already.
Yeah, like, this isn't new to some cultures. Yeah.
Right.
I
Yeah,
love
there's some research out on meditation and Alzheimer's. It's beneficial for Alzheimer's, and you do a meditation, 12-minute meditation, the Kirtan Kriya. You just do the Kirtan Kriya, and then you have a hand movement, and apparently that also it has been researched and beneficial. Yes, I'm not surprised. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. No,
But
I love it.
you have to pull it in from any. I just think you have to pull in information from everywhere, and keep an open mind, and be able to try some things that are non-invasive, and if it works for you, all the better. But at its baseline, it's also there's a lot of common sense involved as well. What your grandma said: eat your greens. Don't sit all day. Just go and move around a bit. That kind of thing is all common sense, and of course that's good for you. Get
Mhm.
outside, get some fresh air. Yes, of course. Yeah. So
Exactly.
yes.
Exactly. No, I love it. And I was wondering too if you would mind sharing a little bit of the story that you shared with me before we started recording. And it was in relation to us having that conversation around sort of like the social experience of Alzheimer's and how we often kind of dismiss people with Alzheimer's and we think that they're not necessarily present. And like you were saying, we talk about them in front of them and that kind of a thing and the impact of it. But you've got a beautiful story about your mom and actually your dog too being part of it. And I wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing that with the audience. I think they'd love it.
Sure. Yeah, I noticed already with my mom that when she had full-blown Alzheimer's, it was noticeable for everyone, because at the beginning, it's on a slope. Or rather like this, you decline very slowly. But at some point, people would talk to me and not to her about her, and that was very annoying to her. And I could sense that she was annoyed, but she couldn't really express her frustration because sometimes words were missing, or she just I sense it as a mood change in her. And but I thought to myself, you never know what is left, what she's thinking really, even if she can't express what she's thinking, and I know her very well. Still, you never know for sure what is left. And I have a story about that. When we were kids, we were really, really very charmed by these 101 Dalmatian movies. So we forced a Dalmatian upon her, and then another one, consecutive in a row, because they passed. And once the last one was gone, she said, "I'm done. No more dogs for me," because she was so sick and tired of hoovering all these white hairs that kept stuck everywhere, and she was just done with it. But when I took care of her, I was with my son, who was 7 at the time. I had promised him, once we get to live in the country, I promised him a dog. So there was a dog, and I sort of not told my mom that we were getting a dog. Because to be honest, she wouldn't have agreed. But she was 5 years into her Alzheimer's diagnosis. So we did it anyway, my son and I, and it turned out they became the best of friends. It was the dog who was happy to see her when she came home after 10 times, and we said just hardly hello, and a dog doesn't have these kind of thoughts, they just, okay, they're happy to see you, and 5 minutes later, if you show up, they're happy to see you. So they became the best of friends. And sometimes very melodramatically, my mom said, oh, you're my only friend. But anyway, something happened. She would never have let the dog into her bedroom, let alone her bed. Well, she was still, healthy, but because they were such good friends, at some point, she allowed the dog, her name is Speck, into her bed. And when my mom would go to bed at night, then 2 seconds later, the dog was off to bed as well, under the duvet, and the dog would sleep at her feet. So fast forward to her final days, my mom's final days, she was in the bed, and I put a warm water bottle into the bed just to keep her a bit warm. And then she was not totally there, but at some point she just, was very conscious. And then all of a sudden she said, oh, there's Speck, dog's name. So even in her final days, full-blown Alzheimer's, she came up with this dog's name, and the notion that something warm in her bed was a dog. So you never know. That's what I thought. You never know what is left in somebody's mind. And also you never know what strong of a bond you can make with an animal. That's also super important, because they were the best of friends. It lasted for 5 years. Yeah, 5-6 years. The bonds were so strong. They were really, people in the village thought the dog was hers, not ours. So she took her out, and sometimes she forgot to take her out, and I had to get her back. But anyway.
I love
Yes.
that. I love that story for so many reasons, but I think it's also it's so important for us to remember. My grandfather had dementia. And I had some of the same kind of, my mom and I were helping to take care of him towards the end. And we had some of the same experiences of him being dismissed. And also the frustration for us of seeing the person that we knew disappearing, and not being able to relate in the same kind of way. But then when there are those moments where you realize there is still a part of them there, and how we need to treasure that and create as many opportunities to support them in being who they are, and on the life experience that they're having, that this is just part of their life experience, and that also animals can add so very much to our life experiences. And that is just the story with your mom is just testament to that, of like,
Yes.
Love and bonding can come in so many different ways. And I think dogs in particular can often offer us that experience when we need it the most.
Yes.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I love that. I love that. I wanted to ask you as well one quick question, one kind of last quick question before we go into how people can work with you. I want to hear a little bit more about that. But normally I ask my guests at the end of an interview what they feel like their dogs have taught them about what it means to be human. And if you want to answer that, you're more than welcome to answer that. But I also, as I was kind of reflecting, I wondered if you might have some wisdom about what Alzheimer's and the experience of Alzheimer's is actually teaching us or asking us to recognize about what it means to be human.
Yes. Wow. Do you have another hour?
I know it's a big question.
I think for Alzheimer's is, like I said, you never know what is truly happening for the person who has it. And it gives me hope for myself, because I'm from a long lineage of women who died of Alzheimer's. It gives me hope for myself. It proves that you can actually somehow keep things in your brain that if you work hard enough, or it's interesting enough, or it's valuable enough for you, you can keep them until the very last end. And that's what is the most, that's what is making us human in the end. It's this treasure you can cherish, and nobody or nothing is able to take that away from you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's not easy, because it takes a lot of work. At the same time, it takes work. I mean, you have to be intentional about it. And I think even if you're intentional about it, you can even reap greater benefits. Yeah,
absolutely.
To keep whatever it is that makes us human, this discernment, this you value some things over others. Your loved ones, you keep them in your mind, in your heart, in your mind. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that too.
You're welcome.
Sandra, this has just been such a delight. I absolutely love talking to you. And I wanted to ask you, if people want to work with you, if they want some support from a brain health coach, or they just want to have a conversation with you, where is a good way for them to reach you?
I'm on Instagram. There's something I didn't tell you, but I named my business after my mom. It's Elisabeth Hendrix Method. It's because I decided upon her right after her death that I wanted to do everything in my power to not develop Alzheimer's, and that meant, after close observation, flipping everything she didn't do in the end. So everything that I thought it was up for a test and trial and error, I trial and error, and that's how I came up with my method to stave off Alzheimer's as much as possible. And so you can find me on Instagram at Elisabeth Hendrix Method, on Facebook as well, the same name. I organize brain health retreats in France, cookery classes as well, and one-to-one coaching. So perfect. If you want a chat, I'm more than happy to be talking to anyone with about this subject, a very important subject.
It's a very important subject, and I will leave those links in the show notes as well, so you can contact Sandra directly from there. Sandra, is there anything else that I've not asked you that you want to make sure that we mentioned today?
Oh, we talked about a lot, right?
We did. Oh, this is perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your generosity. I am so grateful for you.
Well, thank you, Alexia. I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for my conversation with brain health coach and chef Sandra van Tongerloo. If you would like to learn more about how to future-proof your brain health and how to work with Sandra, reach out to her on Instagram at Elisabeth Hendrix Method, and that's Elisabeth spelled with an S, or on Facebook at Sandra van Tongerloo. I've left these links in the show notes. Sandra is actually hosting a brain health and culinary retreat in France from the 22nd to the 28th of April, and there are still a couple of spots left. If you want some more information, please get in touch with her. If you haven't listened to the Fetch First Friday episode that Stacy and I did on canine cognitive dysfunction, then definitely check that out next. And if you'd like to learn more about how you can support your dog's overall health by feeding them according to their energetics, grab your free copy of our Fetch Guide to Decoding Your Dog's Energetic Paw Print. It will help you identify if your dog leans towards being a warm dog or a cool dog, and how to best feed them to support optimal health. I've left the link for your free copy in the show notes. Once you discover your dog's energetic paw print, would you do me a favor and let me know what you discovered? Do you have a warm dog or a cool dog? I'd love to know. You can DM me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama. All right, until next time.